So the wonderful world of connections. I actually did not know Keia, but we both know Kathy Burrows, who's a wonderful sales trainer, a former nurse, and that's how we got connected. So I think that's a great opportunity, right? So
Absolutely. Kathy's the best.
Kathy is the best. Love her. Please tell us about yourself. Tell us your wonderful career thus far.
Yeah. In a nutshell, I was an athlete, and I was afforded through a series of, I would call them circumstantial coincidences. I was afforded the really cool opportunity to pursue a career in sports, beginning at a sports museum, the Basketball Hall of Fame. That was my first role right out of college. Then subsequently at Golf Digest magazine, a sports magazine, a Condé Nast publication here in New York City. I worked there while I was in grad school. And then next stop was at the NBA, WNBA league office, entry-level role. I worked in a department that was team marketing and business operations, sort of an internal consultancy to all the NBA, WNBA, and G League teams. And finally, I left the league life and came to the New York Liberty back in 2011, and I have been here since. So this summer will be my 14th season with the New York Liberty of the WNBA. So that's probably the 40-second version of it. That was all the culmination of first an undergraduate field of study in marketing. I wanted to be a marketer. I was thriving and striving to be a VP of marketing at some company. And then immediately upon graduation, recognized that I had a true passion and interest in sports, and ended up moving to New York to pursue a sports management degree at NYU. So as they say, the rest is history. Sounds somewhat linear when I say it out loud. But it really was an unfolding of a series of networking opportunities. I wrote my thesis on the WNBA, which is how I landed an interview or a meeting at the NBA, which turned into my first foray into pro sports.
So in terms of the concept of sports marketing, it encompasses a lot of things. Do people really understand what it really entails? They kind of have some ideas, but they don't really have ideas, do they?
Not at all. And I'll say, focus group of one, I had no idea. As a person who graduated in 99 from high school. Yep, everybody can guffaw in the room. I finished college in 2003. I'm sort of right on the cusp of being raised in an analog world and then quickly transitioning into digital. And I didn't even appreciate what careers existed, what sports marketing meant, with the studies that I had. I sort of left school. I entered my graduate work thinking that my pathway to working in sports was either going to be as a sports agent or as a coach. So I played at Canisius University in Buffalo, New York. I was half offered a graduate assistant role, so coaching track right as soon as I finished, and then ultimately that was taken away from me. So it was the best thing that ever happened. I didn't want to be a coach. I just thought that was maybe a way that I could stay connected to the game. And then I decided, well, you know what? I took this sports law course. My former college teammate was playing overseas. She played in a series of countries, and she said, well, if you think you want to be an agent, why don't you represent me? Why don't you do my next contract? At the time, she was playing in Puerto Rico. And I went through the rigor of representing her while I was at NYU. And in about 10 minutes, I realized that I did not want to do that for a career. So now I've knocked off the two things that I thought were going to bring me to sports. I didn't want to be a coach, or actually I got stopped short of that anyways. And then I didn't want to be an agent either. And then I accept this role at the NBA, and I mentioned, you know, it was a consultancy, but the projects that I worked on from day one, sports marketing really encompasses um, a plethora of things. Like my job, which was team marketing focused, I was tracking ticket sales and how um, ticket sales in this league were advertised. That's sports marketing. I was very heavily involved in the social responsibility initiatives that were happening across the country, across all of the teams. What programs were they running? What initiatives and nonprofit organizations were they partnering with? That's sports marketing. And then subsequently, I moved over to partnerships, sponsorship focus, a sponsorship focus at the WNBA level. And it was what brands are wanting to align with WNBA teams. And in our league, because of the audience size, it was less about what sign can you put up and more about what marketing program can you put together that brings our brands together and brings it to life. That's sports marketing. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm a Rhodes Scholar. I'm at the NBA. I'm learning all these things. And then I get to a team. I arrive at the New York Liberty as the marketing manager in 2011. And on my first day, my boss said, I'm slammed. I'm drowning. This is again 2006. You guys will laugh. She said, I'm doing Facebook and Twitter. Let's split it up. You do Facebook, I'll do Twitter." And then I turned, and I'm not a social media person even to this day. And literally, she's like, "Start a YouTube channel." I was interviewing talent for TV. I was writing copy for the in arena host to read about theme nights that were going on in the for the games. That's all sports marketing. I didn't actually understand or appreciate any of that um, as a fan or as a spectator of a sports team. But once you're through those doors, you know, pretty much, you know, everything is sports marketing when it comes to how you amplify um, sports and athletes.
So one of the things I always preach is the fact that even though you're working in sports, it's really just an insurance office with a nice court or a field. It's not like you get to go and just, you know, watch every game. Is that something that you really have to kind of reinforce with especially young people that this is a business? It's not necessarily a spectator.
Yeah, you know, actually, you would be surprised that it comes pretty naturally because of the scope of work, and we look at our business in terms of verticals. So while I'm the CEO of the team and I have a 360-degree view of this entire business, soup to nuts, every dollar we spend, every dollar we make, every person we hire, the culture of our team, the vision for the future, like that's my job. But everyone else is sort of in this very specific siloed role where if you have been hired to be the PR manager for this team, you are hired to handle the publicity, the player publicity, the front office publicity, writing press releases. So you're so entrenched in your day to day, in your track, that game time is actually showtime. I don't know that after about 2 months in your role, you even look at it as I'm getting to go to a game. You really feel like I'm going to the most important part of my job, which is being completely on and being customer focused and being in a service role, if you will, within whatever realm that you work. You know, I mentioned PR again. PR is very much in service to the media during our games and very much in service to our players. Our ticket sales department is very much in service to the fan. Our sponsorship department is very much in service to the corporate brands and really shepherding how they show up in arena, from signage to halftime um, features, to how they do their hospitality and really, you know, host our partners either in a suite or courtside. So I haven't in my nearly 18 years encountered anyone who, actually there's one person, they don't work here anymore, who really did want to just like veg out and come, you know, watch games and not work. But you will not last long in this career if that's the MO. Not at all.
Maddie has a question. Maddie?
Who's someone that has greatly impacted your career and how did they impact you?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. There's been so many people. especially within the WNBA. I mentioned my time working at the W, and interestingly enough, it was my time at the league office where I would watch and monitor and track and measure what teams were doing. And there were several team presidents, which is essentially the role I have now. But at this time, I was 20 something and a coordinator. I was watching how they did business, and particularly there's a woman who she now works for the Dallas Wings, but she was a director of marketing for the Phoenix Mercury back in the day, Amber Cox. There was a woman named Karen Bryant, who was the team president of the Seattle Storm at the time. And there was a woman who was the COO of the New York Liberty, Amy Shear. All three folks, actually, Karen just left the WNBA for like her third stint, but all three folks intently, I was almost like a doughy-eyed youngster watching women in power, and it completely inspired me. But it was more so their connection to others in the ecosystem. They saw me. They saw me and had conversations and lent advice, and I was like a pipsqueak at the league office. Like, I was taking notes in the meeting, and I was, I wasn't getting coffee, but I was like literally a designated note taker and a designated PowerPoint editor. And I would call teams to ask for information. I would call teams to gain best practices that I could then distill down and share with other teams. And those women just took time to really lend their mind share and what they had learned along the way. And for a really long time, and I've told Amber, the one person, this, I emulated her career. Like, I was a coordinator who wanted to be a team director of marketing. That was what I wanted to do. I just was intrigued by the projects that she worked on. And, it's one of those things, as they say, you can't really be it if you can't see it. And I had not seen it. And then when I saw it, I was like, this is pretty cool. I would also say I had the really, really cool privilege of having worked for every single commissioner / WNBA president that there ever was, with the exception of the first, which was Val Ackerman. Val has since become a mentor of mine. But when I joined the league office, Donna Orender was the commissioner of the league. Title was president back then. But Donna is probably the most high profile person that I spent a ton of time with and was inspired by. And same deal, she was moving the WNBA into a different era, the era of national television. Under her purview, the ESPN deal was brokered. Under her purview, she really gave a lot of empowerment to our players. And I completely admired that. And as such, when I got in the driver's seat at the team level, she's one of the first people that I called and continue to call, just for understanding in terms of looking at what's next and what's on the forefront and what's on the horizon, and in ways that could continue to help the league grow.
So next is Kayla May. Kayla?
So you talk about kind of watching other women in power, like as you were first entering this workforce. What would you say are some challenges you face as a woman of color in a leadership role?
Yeah, the huge benefit for me is that I work in the WNBA. I'm asked this question literally everywhere I go, and I will not say by any means that any of this has been easy. I think, if anything, the hardest part of being a leader as a woman of color in this league is that until just recently, I felt like I was marketing and amplifying and representing and trying to grow a demo that looked like me. The WNBA is 80% plus Black women, and it's a disappointment and quite honestly an exhausting feeling to want and know that they're top talent and the masses should be watching and they should be making tons of money from endorsement deals and even their salaries, and millions of people should be watching. And you take all that, there were times where I've taken that on myself because I'm a part of that demo, and it's like, why aren't we turning the corner? We're trying everything. We're working so hard. the talent is through the roof. These are the best basketball players in the world that happen to be women. And why do we continue to have so many naysayers, so much negative talk, so much get back in the kitchen and make a sandwich, or, being voted the most likely league to fold in annual polls? And I'm talking about, this is a decade ago, you guys. Like, this was sort of like as I was working, like really paying dues and like in the trenches and not in a leadership role. Those are the things that I took home with me at night. And just to be in this part where I don't think we've accomplished everything we're going to accomplish as a league or as the industry of women's sports, but there's so much rising tide right now that it feels like all those really hard years were really worth it.
Jocelyn, what's your question?
You mentioned that you were given opportunities that helped lead you to where you are today. So, what would be your advice to a student coming out of college that aspires to work in the sports industry?
Yeah. Another great question. I mentioned, I described it as circumstantial opportunities, almost right place, right time. But the skill that I would encourage all of you to hone is one of, and I know you've heard it before, but networking. And what does networking mean, right? It's not like, let me cold email or LinkedIn 150 people with a carbon copy message, but it's showing up at events, finding connection points. And I'll give you a quick example. When I presented my thesis to the executive who worked at the WNBA, about halfway through, she said, "Do you want to work here? Would you like to work here?" And I said, "Absolutely. As a matter of fact, here's a resume. Let me just drop this on your desk." No pressure, no pressure. She says, let's keep in touch. And this is instinct. No one told me how to network, but in my mind, all I could think about was working in the WNBA or working for her or working at a team after we met. After I wrote that paper and after I met her and I walked through those doors and I was at the Olympic Tower on Fifth Avenue in New York City, there was nothing else that I wanted to do more than work at that place. So then it was like, okay, let me look on the job boards. Teamwork Online I think still is the place where you find jobs in sports right now. It's still the industry standard. And I kept going on, not finding anything. But she said to me as I was walking out, "Let's stay close." Okay, how do I stay close without being annoying? How do I stay close and you don't even have a role for me? So I would just find points. KB, Kristen Bernard, played at Siena College and I played at Canisius University. That's the MAC conference. So when the MAC championship was going on and I saw Siena in the MAC championship, I would email her and say, "Good luck to your Saints and go MAC." Subtle, nothing about the job. The WNBA season tips off. "Hey, I'll be watching. Start a season. Great, good luck. Oh, All-Star game was amazing. Da 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 da." And on probably that fifth BS email, if you will, she replied back with a job description. As someone who receives like 1,000 emails a week, things can, you get a lot from people, but it's the persistence. It's trying to find and meet people for, similarities and connective tissue. And that's the work of networking. It's not just, I sent you an email and I sent you an email and I sent you an email. It's kind of like trying to find what makes sense or asking the right questions or asking for informational interviews. Oftentimes when I speak at panels, I've had people walk up to me after the panel and say, "I came to the panel because I knew you would be here." We happen to have a third renewal of an intern who did that. Like literally, we won't let him go. We don't have a role for him, but he came in as an intern, but he literally showed up to make his pitch in person. And that goes a long way with folks. Another point, and I have to make this point, is as you enter the sports field or as you attempt to enter the sports field, a willingness to do something that you may not think is your real path is very important. And another quick example, I am super shy. I actually am averse to public speaking. And I was completely averse to cold calling. And my first job at the Basketball Hall of Fame was in ticket sales. I sold tickets to a museum. I had zero training. And I literally signed up to get on the phone and be rejected. But the minute I got my first sale, you couldn't tell me anything. But if you would have asked me what I would do, or if you could have any job, it was never, I want to talk, I want to make calls all day, or make 100 calls and be a ticket seller. That is actually the most, the highest quantity of roles in sports every year. It's actually probably the easiest way to enter the sports field is through the ticket sales department, because most teams have somewhere between 20 and 60 people who sell tickets for a living, both on the phone and one-to-one in person. So being willing to do something that might be a little bit out of your scope or even out of your concentration. I left NYU with a sports management master's degree with a focus on marketing and media. And then I took a really, really mainstream general role where I was like measuring ticket sellers revenue, like every single rep in the league. I ran the ticket sales recognition contest, and I literally did the roster cards. Like I would literally be in HTML coding on the website every team matchup for the league. That had nothing to do with my job, and I never wanted to do that. It was a necessity. It was part of paying my dues. For several years, I edited the WNBA operations manual, which is the general counsel legal department at the WNBA's job. But essentially, because at the time they didn't have a huge staff, and I knew most of the rules and regulations and compliance of the WNBA, like I literally just did the editing because that was what I was asked to do. And the last point I'll make is I took notes. I took so many notes. Like I can't tell you, I'm so happy for like recorded Zooms and all the technology that has happened, because I didn't know how big of a blessing it was going to be. But when I worked at the NBA, there were these weekly meetings. So there's like a team president's meeting. So it's all 12 teams. And then there's a sponsorship directors meeting. So all the VPs and directors of sponsorship from every team. And then there's a ticket sales meeting. I would literally be in the call to take roll call to make sure every team was on. And then I would take the notes, and then I would edit the notes and send them out to the whole group afterward. And it seemed at the time like the biggest monotony and biggest waste of time. And I felt like I was being punished by my direct supervisor. And what I didn't know is I was learning every single nook and cranny of this business by specialty. And when it came time for me to go to a team, and then fast forward, like I get to run a team, but I have like 2 decades of knowledge of what teams have been doing, because I literally took the notes on those calls, and I listened to all those experts talk about their successes, but more importantly, listen to their challenges and their failures. So yeah, I know that's a super long-winded answer, but hopefully it's a little bit helpful.
Fantastic. Hayden, what's your question?
So with your high profile job as CEO, how do you balance your work life and your personal life to like avoid burnout in the industry?
Yeah. It's always a work in progress. I have not conquered it. It is not perfect. I'm a wife. My husband is incredibly supportive. We have 2 kids. They're 12 and 10. And I had to learn to give myself grace about the things that I may falter on at home. And I had to learn to give myself grace for the things that I falter on at work. I think one of the privileges I have is to be a mom and to have a workforce who reports into me, but to be honest about this being everyone's challenge and everyone having to figure it out on their own. And I happen to now, for a really long time, I mean, like I said, I've been with the Libs for 14, I think for like 9 of them, I was the only parent on the team. So I actually didn't have a connection point with anyone. Now, I have a couple people who also have kids, and it's not preferential treatment. It's making this work in the way that it works for you. But also understanding that, and don't take this the wrong way, as I know all of you are aspiring, I assume, or some of you are aspiring to work in sports. The really cool thing is, we don't actually save lives. And this is not to diminish what we do, but sometimes what feels like earth shattering and the most important thing, and you're so stressed out, it's like, I'm gonna miss this just happened to me. I missed, I didn't miss, I sacrificed a work thing to go to my son's championship game, his little tiny rinky dink rec league in our town, but he was in the championship and I didn't want to miss it. And I missed something very important at work. It was a decision that I made. And I shared that decision with my direct reports because at some point they're going to have to make a decision. There are also times where I miss things that are really, really important with my family because I need to be at work. It's not a balance. It's always out of balance, quite frankly. And I received a really, really important nugget from a panel that I was on. A woman said, look, you're always going to have a bunch of balls in the air as an executive, as a leader. You just have to be able to distinguish and identify which of those balls in the air are glass and which of them are rubber, because something's going to fall, but you got to make sure that you let the rubber ones fall, not the glass ones. And I take that to heart every single day. Well, maybe not every day, every week.
Fantastic. Austin has a question. Austin?
So with the WNBA seeing like significant growth in popularity in recent years, like what strategies have you implemented to increase your fan engagement and ticket sales with Liberty?
Yeah. The growth has been welcome, a welcome change, I think, for all of the league. And I think a lot of the dividends that we are all seeing right now is a result of investment. It's a result of having either existing owners who doubled down and said, I'm gonna not just put more money into my team, but I'm gonna ensure that I have really great talent working in the front office. And we're gonna spend money on marketing, we're gonna spend money on advertising. But really, it is truly about the investment. And I happen to work for a fairly new owner. Joe and Claire Sy have owned the Liberty now for 5 years. And their intentionality about ensuring that the women are treated with the utmost respect and treated like the professional athletes that they are has in turn, I think the basketball has improved, the experience in the arena has improved, and we have several ways to watch. Though, I mean, it's not one thing, it's like 12 things came together over the last 6 or 7 years that have caused this immense growth. And this is no research, and you could count me an expert on this or not, but because I've been around for so long, I also just think the world sort of caught up with what the WNBA represents. It's cool for people to support women and big up women, and sexism is kind of out. I think, I joke, I'm like, after Hillary Clinton lost the election is really when we turn the corner. We're just seeing like the growth of that, but really that was when people started saying like, F it, like, I don't, I'm not subscribing to that. You have NBA players that tuned in, you have celebrities tuned in, like all of the things started happening, but really it's society, for lack of a better term, as bad as we are sometimes, like this is one really positive thing that has come out. And I think particularly your generation is less sexist than my generation. Your generation is more inclusive than my generation. And when we all celebrate our differences, the better off we are. And the WNBA just happened to be like just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like the jungle of inclusivity. You have the most diverse groups of people coming together for 2 hours and rooting for the same thing and on one accord. That beautiful thing wasn't celebrated 12 years ago. It's absolutely celebrated and almost envied by some of the other leagues and sports now because people truly know why they're here.
Brady?
Working at the top level of sports, how do you deal with different egos?
Egos, say a little bit more. Whose egos? Players,
Everybody.
corporate folks?
Corporate folks, yeah.
Yeah. I actually don't think I deal with a ton of ego in my role with the New York Liberty. There's still a little bit of I'll call it edge or nuance in comparing men's and women's sports. So there is this level of just a superiority of men's sports that still exists. And this really shines through when you start to think about, I mean, the NCAA just shattered this, but like is the game on ESPN or ESPN2? Is the WNBA team going to be displaced from their arena because of the NBA preseason, or are they going to, play second fiddle? I think, I don't know if I would describe that as ego, but there's definitely still this essence of superiority and inferiority that exists in certain instances. In certain instances, I think we're so much better than we ever were, but those are probably the challenges that loom largest for me, because I have to stand at the forefront and advocate for what the women deserve, and continue to try to advocate for equity, not necessarily equality, not necessarily the same exact thing that men's sports has, but our fair share and what will help us be successful. So that's probably the most egotistical thing that happens, is just this notion of, oh, well, of course, you're not going to do that. That's for men's sports. And it's like, oh, I think you should pump the brakes because this makes good business sense for us.
Fantastic. Marcel, what's your question?
What do you think is the biggest thing you had to overcome along your journey to get to where you are in your career, whether that be like internal or in the workforce?
Yeah, biggest obstacle. It's a good one. For this particular role, and I already disclosed this, I'm super vulnerable about it because I suspect that a lot of people struggle with this. It was getting over my uncomfortability with speaking publicly. I never saw myself in a career where I would be a spokesperson, or I would be making speeches or sitting on panels or going on television. And that's where I am. It almost is counterintuitive to anything I ever thought I'd do. Even my mom says it. She's like, I can't believe that this is your reality. And the truth of the matter is that my passion just loomed way larger than my fears. And I had something to say, and when it was time to say it, I opened my mouth and used my voice. So probably personally, that's the biggest challenge that I've had to overcome. I often wanted to be in doer roles and in low-key roles, and probably lingered in middle management for a little bit longer than I needed to, because I didn't want to be out in the forefront. I don't have a huge ego. It wasn't about being in the spotlight. It's never been about being in the spotlight for me. I sort of had an atypical or a non-traditional pathway to leadership for that reason, which is also why I talk about it so often, because I think we all have that one thing that might just hold us back. It might just keep us small. But if you can just conquer that one thing, you don't know what can be on the other side.
So our next question is from Nicholas, who's from Ireland, a visiting student, and he's more shocked that the ball isn't on the ground to kick. But what's your question, Nicholas?
So looking back on your career to become the CEO, what are some key lessons you've learned along the way that have shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, good question. And by the way, Nicholas, you'll be able to watch WNBA games. TNT just announced an international rights deal where games will be broadcast in the UK and Ireland. That just got announced yesterday. I don't know if you saw. But back to your question, some of the skills and things that I've learned, most notably time management. As a collegiate athlete, I think I had a really, really great practice run to be a student athlete, and that is carried over every day. There's not a day that I don't think about the benefits of me having been a point guard for so long, how they haven't influenced my professional career. I think influence on my leadership style came from my career trajectory. I've been in the same, not the same role exactly or same company, but almost the same company for a really long time. So I've done a lot of the roles. Like, when you start as a green employee and you move yourself up, it has absolutely influenced my leadership style from the aspect of empathy and leading with care and leading with more understanding of the people who are beginning, middle, or approaching leadership because I've been there before. So a lot of how I lead is influenced by or informs how I will coach, how I will probe, how I will ask questions, how I will challenge people, try to push them to their limit, try to make them punch above their weight, because uh, I've seen personally the benefits of those opportunities. You know, if you're stuck in a room and someone told you, make this widget and make it this way and don't deter from it, like, you know, 95% of you in the room will do just that. But if someone came in and said, can you figure out a way to do this better, quicker, faster? Can you figure out a different shape of the widget that might, you know what I mean? And it's like that's how I look at the business. And I think it would be easy in sports with what we do to just say, run it back. Like, you know what I mean? We had this many people last season attend the finals game. We broke a record for the amount of money we made on the game 3 and 4. And it's kind of like, we could just say rinse and repeat this year, or I could literally set a bar a little bit higher, and then we can have a constructive and awesome conversation about how we go about getting bigger and better. And I think, you know, that all came from all these years of being kind of in it and wanting to be ready for this moment.
Well, fantastic. Malachi, what's your question?
So in your position, what's the difference in your work life between the off season and during the season?
Yeah, it's a great question. The off season is the on season. The off season is the planning season. The cadence of our games are so close together. We play 40 games, regular season plus playoffs. It rounds out to about 2.3 games a week. So you don't have a lot of time in between games to reinvent yourself or even and think of new ideas or execute any new ideas, because there's just not enough time to plan it. So the planning actually happens when we're not playing. We will calendar out what every single theme night looks like. We will calendar out what every single giveaway looks like. If you're going to do a bobblehead, you better be ready to do you better know who you're going to do a bobblehead of 5 months in advance. Selling sponsorships happens outside the season, because if, you know, I can't call a brand today and say, oh, you know, tomorrow, do you want to have your sign on our building? It's like long planning timelines. So from October, and going to the finals was a blessing and a curse, because we played so long into the off season. We lost 5 weeks of what is typically our planning season. So a lot of us are feeling it right now. I can't believe we're 34 days till tip. But really, it's crucial what we do in the off season in terms of being ready for the tip off, because once it starts, it starts. There's not a lot of variability, with the exception of advertising and single game ticket sales. So, you know, I don't know how much time you guys spend on ticketing and how ticket operations works, but there's the season ticket, the person who buys every single game. There's a group ticket. I came out with 10 or more people. I'm probably a really casual fan. I might only come to one per season. And then there's single game tickets. I bought it on Ticketmaster or one of those types of platforms. The Ticketmaster people, 75% of them buy 3 days before the game. So we still have time to influence their decision. And that's the only sort of thing that's constantly and consistently happening in the season. It's like, how are we dropping advertisements and videos and content on social and serving them emails and serving them sponsored ads, because we're trying to influence you like in the moment. That's the hype of what we're doing then. And then it's the execution. What does it feel like in the arena? What is the DJ playing? What is the in-arena host saying? What is Ellie the mascot dancing to? Those are all real time. Like, again, there's rehearsals and planning, but when it's game time, it's game time. So the off season, truly, I could have answered this in 4 seconds, is the planning season. And we've laid a ton of that groundwork. I gotta shout out, my team is remarkable. We lost in game 4 in the playoffs. Maybe 4 weeks later, they delivered to me a 200 slide deck, every single vertical, recapped the season, talked about our wins, talked about our losses. and we've set goals for this year, and the rest is kind of like, okay, now we gotta execute.
Diego, what's your question?
Yeah, my question is, what are some of your biggest mistakes that you have made back then that you wouldn't make now, and how has that helped you improve in what you do?
Yeah, excellent question. Made a ton of mistakes. I'm a true believer though that if you don't make any mistakes, you're leaving something on the table. You're sacrificing a bigger reward if you don't take risks. I deem myself a risk taker, but I will say a mistake that I learned from in all that sort of, take risks and I'm gonna be big and bold. It sounds so mundane, but trusting my gut. Sometimes if something just doesn't feel right and it's a decision that doesn't sit right with you, I think as a CEO and as a business leader, we're sort of trained and conditioned to make decisions based on data points and based on references and people's opinions and, democracy, if you will. But if it doesn't sit well with you, and it happened to me, and I wish I could say it only happened once, but with a major impact and effect, I hired someone that immediately after making the offer, extending the offer, I had a terrible feeling about them. And I let it go and I said, what's the worst that could happen? And it wound up having residual impact on our business, on my psyche, on the team culture. And I knew it was a mistake before it happened, and I didn't trust my gut. That's one mistake. A second is, most of you or all of you will just be getting started, but I think there is a such thing as becoming complacent and staying in a role for too long. I enjoyed thoroughly my time at the NBA, but I probably should have expanded my search and looked for a new opportunity about 2 years before I did. And it slowed down my career a bit, and I offer it as not advice, but just you asked me about biggest mistakes. That was a mistake in my career, to stay there for 4.5 years with little movement and little growth. I was learning, but then there came a point where I hit a plateau, and I should have imagined what I wanted to do next a little bit earlier.
Reed, what's your question?
What is the biggest misconception of your job?
I couldn't hear you. Can you say that one more
What is
time?
the biggest misconception of your job?
Ooh, biggest misconception. Well, I'll give you two. So one is that my title is CEO, and literally I describe it as I have oversight of the business side. And no matter how many times I say that, many people think that I'm more basketball focused. So the misconception is that the CEO is the GM. Unfortunately, I get to ask tons of questions about who we're going to draft and who we're going to trade and what are we looking for. Do I know the game and do I know our players? Yes, but I actually don't make those decisions. I think another misconception with regard to my job is that I'm somehow waiting with bated breath to just get good enough to work in one of the big four men's leagues. I'm often asked when I'm going to make the jump, even by family, why are you spending so much time in the WNBA? And the truth of the matter is, at this point in time, and I never say never, but at this point in time, even if you offered me the team president role at an NBA team or an NFL team, I actually wouldn't be interested in it. I feel very connected to the work that I do. And I think there is this misconception that every person who works in the WNBA is using it as a stepping stone to get somewhere else. And that is not always the case. It is absolutely the case for some people, and that's okay. That is perfectly okay with me. And I hire people knowing that sometimes because that's their journey, but my journey is not that.
So you mentioned that, that idea that you're just jumping to the big four. Is it not a better opportunity that people look at working in the WNBA because they might be able to do and broaden and create different things that if they went to the big four, they might be told, sorry, we don't do things that way.
100%. I mean, the breadth of what I have been able to learn and troubleshoot and work stream would not have been available to me at the men's side. And I don't say that for like, you know, the grass is greener and this is an us versus them situation. I work for an organization that also owns an NBA team and a G League team and a 2K team and an arena. And if I lined up all the employees in this company next to the employees in the Liberty vertical, regardless of your title, you have more decision-making power on a daily basis. And it's not so much that it's just a smaller number of people, it's the breadth of how everything is sort of interconnected that you need to make decisions that are more holistic, and it's a more 360 approach to the type of business that it is. For example, marketing, PR, social responsibility are so interconnected. Like there's probably not a thing that those three departments do where they're not going to consult the other two departments. And I'm not saying that that doesn't exist in the NBA, but more often than not, it needs to be a well-oiled machine on our side because of the key constituents that we're going to serve and the decision makers that are going to make the decisions. So I fully agree. A little bit more opportunity to dip your toe on this side of the business.
So you mentioned Karen Bryant before. She's a Seattle U basketball grad, so that's how I always knew her, but also had started the Seattle Reign in the ABL before all this, right? And now the WNBA.
Yep.
We're now starting to see people like my bud Jess Smith, who are coming over from other leagues to actually do this. Is that not, kind of a sign that the W is starting to grow when you're getting people from the bigger leagues that want to come to you and grow you as well?
100%. I have always been a proponent. I mean, my whole soapbox about wanting to work in the WNBA is because I consider myself top talent. And all top talent doesn't need to go to the big four. And I think we're seeing it now where not only are we attracting talent from other leagues, but we have some of the pioneers of the game, some of the best to ever do it, like a Karen Bryant, circle the block and come back to the W. And I think that's a testament to one, the longevity of the league. This is our 28th season. And certainly there are kinks to work out, and new leagues all have to figure themselves out. And this is now just one generation plus where I think the world can see there's something here. There's a real commercial opportunity. There's a real fan base. It's generational. It's going nowhere. We shouldn't be afraid that any of this is at jeopardy anymore. And I think, when you're in year 5, 6, 7, there's still that fear. When you're in year 10, 11, 12, you know what I mean? I happen to have joined the league in its 10th year. So, now it's kind of a sigh of relief, like, all right, we're good.
Well, thank you very much, Keia. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This is like, I am not kidding you. Is one of my favorite things to do is to speak to students, and especially those who are trying to figure out how to take their first step into sports, into their careers even generally. So really appreciate all the wonderful questions and the attentiveness.
Yeah, we won't make you apologize for stealing Brianna Stewart from us, but if you could let her know we would like her back, that would be nice.
There's no shot. Sorry.